So I was just going to say welcome to this session on the new immigration rules resulting from Brexit and the changes that they're going to have. Thank you. We've actually had quite a good response to this. Not really surprised because obviously Brexit is quite a hot topic. But thank you all for registering. I'm Rachel Tribe, for those of you who don't know, Head of HR Operations, and I'll be handing over to Anam Akhtar, Recruitment and Retention Manager, who'll go into more detail on the changes. Before we start, can I just ask if everyone can mute their microphone and turn off their cameras? But I think everybody's already done that just to help with the call. It is, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, quite a complicated area. So we have tried to keep it as short and concise as possible while providing the information needed. But I do appreciate that people will, I am sure, have questions. So can I ask if you can please put it in the chat channel, and we'll pick it up at the end because we have obviously got time for questions. And if we don't know the answer or we don't get around to it, then obviously we can come back after the session, or indeed you can email Anam or I and we will come back to you afterwards if you think of something after the session. Just to let you know, for ease, on the slides that we've got, we have actually referred to EEA nationals throughout, which includes EU nationals and Swiss nationals, because for this purpose, the actions are the same. So just for ease, we've actually included it all together, although I appreciate they are slightly different. And as I think most of you are probably aware, we are recording this session. So what we will do is we will upload that after this briefing and put it on the EU Hub web pages. And you can actually find additional information on the Hub pages. So I would suggest that you go and have a look there. And we will be updating that as and when the government provides further clarity on some of the things that are not perhaps as clear as they could be at the current time. So yeah, do go and have a look. It has got some useful information on there. So this session is designed to provide you as managers with information on the impact of Brexit changes on future recruitment, but also the impact on our current EEA staff, because obviously we have got quite a lot of EEA staff in the college. So obviously there's some uncertainty among that group around what that means for them. So following on from that point, we will be touching on the UK settlement scheme, which I think most of you are probably aware of because it's been around for a couple of years, which is the scheme which will allow EU staff actually, and EEA as well, to remain in remain in the UK and have the same rights as now. So we'll touch on that. So obviously that would help maybe with encouraging staff who fall into that category to apply for that. And we'll just be going through quickly details on completing right to work checks and any changes that might have happened as a result of Brexit on that front. So, and just actually, I will just mention that these new rules, just for your information, although we are primarily talking about EEA staff here because this comes out of Brexit, they will apply to anybody who is now sponsored, and they do replace the rules that exist currently. So if we have staff who are already sponsored, so we, say Australians or Americans, the new rules replace those rules that were in existence previously. So actually now we have to work to the new rules for the people we've already got. So that does have an impact sometimes in terms of salary levels. So just to make you aware of that. So I'm now going to hand over to Anam, who will pick up in more detail on the changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So as you'll all be aware, the UK left the European Union at the end of the year, and we entered a transition period which lasts until 31st of December this year. During the transition period, free movement continued, but from the 31st of December, freedom of movement is coming to an end, and a new points-based immigration system is being introduced. EEA nationals that are already residing in the UK by the 31st of December and any of their qualifying family members will be able to stay in the UK, and they can apply under the EU settlement scheme, which I'll touch upon what it is in the coming slide. Next slide, please. So the EU settlement scheme, what is it? The scheme allows all EEA, including Swiss nationals, to continue living in the UK, having the same access to work, study, benefits, and public services as they do now. When they make an application for this scheme, they can't choose which status they will get, but they'll either get settled status or pre-settled status. If they acquire settled status, that allows them to stay in the UK indefinitely. But to be able to get the settled status, they have to demonstrate that they have been living in the UK for a continuous 5-year period. When they make an application for that, the length of time that they have had outside of the UK is taken into consideration. Pre-settled status, for those that get to the UK by the 31st of December, they can get that status. Once they have completed the 5 years in the UK, they will be able to apply for the settled status. Next slide, please. So applying for the scheme, it is an online application. Initially, there was a cost associated with it, but it's now free and it has been around for just over 2 years now. The application is available, or you'd complete the application on the government's website on the link shown in this on this slide, but it will also be available on the EU Hub pages. It is a simple and straightforward process. As I said before, at the time of applying, you will not be asked to choose which status you're applying for. The status that you get depends upon how much time you've spent already living in the UK and the number of absences you've had. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of what the application process entails, when you apply for the application, you've got to scan your documents and upload them using an EU Exit ID document check app, which is available on the Android phone and also on the iPhone now, as we've been told. That's one way of uploading your documents. You can also send your documents in the post, or you can visit one of the locations to have your documents scanned. If you choose such an option, there is a cost associated with that. And also because of COVID, some of the location centres are closed. When you're applying for the settlement scheme, you have to prove your residency in the UK. And one way of doing that is by providing your national insurance number. And if you choose to provide that, they will be able to check against your tax records, the amount of work that you've done in the UK, and will be able to establish how long you've been here. If that route is successful, no other documents will be required to prove your residency. If, however, you do not have a national insurance number, there's a list of other documentation which is required, and it is available on the government's website. Next slide, please. Okay, so what does this mean for our existing employees? Any existing EEA and Swiss nationals that we currently employ, the college is not required to undertake any further right to work checks for these people. That is because at the time of employing them, we undertook a full valid right to work check, and therefore no further retrospective checks are required. And the same applies for any EEA and Swiss nationals who come to the UK by the 31st of December. As line managers, as head of departments, head of schools, you should be encouraging your existing EEA staff to be applying for the settled or pre-settled status. At this stage, however, we can't ask them for proof of their application. They're not required to do that, but you should really be encouraging them to do that. If an employee does not apply for the scheme by the 30th of June next year, which is the deadline to apply if you get to the UK by the 31st of December, they could potentially be working in the UK illegally, and that is at their liability. However, if the college is made aware that the individual is working illegally, and we are fully aware of that, we also do have to take reasonable steps to encounter that. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of what is changing in terms of the actual immigration process then, so from the 1st of January, a new points-based system is being introduced. And I say the 1st of January, but this system is actually now into effect from the 1st of December, as Rachel touched upon earlier. And this new points-based system is going to apply to all EEA nationals and Swiss nationals who don't already have the right to work in the UK. So essentially, it treats all of them in the same way now as we did with non-EU citizens. The only exception to that is Irish citizens who will be able to continue working in the UK as they do now. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this new skilled worker process, this table provides an overview of the changes that are coming into effect, and I will touch on them in more detail in the coming slides as well. But just to highlight some of the key changes that are coming into effect, previously under the process, the qualification level that was required was degree level, so RQF level 6. That's now changed to RQF level 3, which means that the qualification that's required is equivalent to A levels. Previously, on the standard occupation list, which we used to determine what sort of roles are eligible for sponsorship, didn't have roles such as technicians, librarians, plumbers, and electricians. All of these roles have now been added to that list, which means that they're eligible for sponsorship. There are also changes to the salary level. Previously, the entry level was 20,800, and that's now changed to 20,480. The experienced worker rate was 30,000, and that's now 25,600. The additional information to note here is that whilst this is the minimum salary level, there is also a going rate for the job. So if we want to continue sponsoring academic roles, for example, the minimum going rate for a lecturer is 40,700, and for a research post is 33,300. However, with this new system now, what applicants can do is that they can trade characteristics, which means that if somebody has a PhD, which is relevant to the role, or the role requires that the individual holds a PhD, they will be able to use their qualification to acquire more points and therefore demonstrate the lower salary for the role. Moving forward, and we should be doing this now anyway, the college is expected to demonstrate and justify why the role needs a PhD. Other changes that are coming into effect are to do with advertising. So as you probably all will be aware, previously to sponsor somebody, we've had to advertise the role for a minimum of 28 days in 2 specialist media. There's also been the requirement to have shortlisting, interview notes, all of those in place to demonstrate why we've recruited the individual that we have. You'll be pleased to know that the 28 days requirement for adverts is no longer going to be in place. But having said that, as a college, we should still be making sure that we're complying with good practice and we're applying for a sufficient period of time, which allows us to generate a good pool of applications. Next slide, please. So other changes in terms of costs for the college: to appoint an EEA or Swiss national at the moment, there was no cost. But from the 1st of January, should they not be here by the 31st of December this year, we will also have to issue them with a certificate of sponsorship under the skilled worker process. The cost for that certificate of sponsorship is £195, as it is at the moment as well, no change there. But there will also be something called the immigration skills charge, which will apply to all EEA and Swiss nationals as well from the 1st of January. This immigration skills charge, however, is only applicable to non-PhD level roles. So if from the 1st of January you ended up appointing a technician from the EEA, you'd have to bear in mind that there will be £1,000 skill charge for the first year of appointing them, and then for every 6-month period, £500. In terms of costs for the individual, again, as it stands, no costs for EEA or Swiss nationals. But from the 1st of January, if they acquire a role with the college, they'd have to pay for their visa costs, which are approximately £600. They'll also have to pay the immigration health star charge, which I'll touch upon in the later slides as well. That's increased from £400 to £624 per annum per household member. In terms of other changes, the annual quota of 20,700, which applied to Tier 2 applicants, is being suspended. The annual cap on skilled workers entering the UK is also being suspended, which means for us as a college is that there will be no limit on the number of migrant workers that can come to the UK under this category, which may be subject to review, but as it stands, that is what the government has introduced. Next slide, please. So this table now just provides a high-level summary of what's happening from the 1st of January. So as I've touched upon, for non-EEA nationals, there's no changes. If we are to offer them a role, and would still have to sponsor them as we do at the moment. For EEA and Swiss nationals who are resident in the UK, and the key to note here, resident, so they may have been offered a role with the college, but if, however, they are not resident in the UK by the 31st of December, they will have to apply for a visa. At the moment, we should be encouraging them to apply for the scheme, and they have until the 30th of June next year to apply. So anybody coming into the UK from the 1st of January, they will need a visa to be able to work in the UK. And the most probable route for sponsoring them will be the skilled worker process, which I've touched upon earlier. I think I'd also like to add here that anybody who currently has a Tier 2 visa and is working for the college under that visa, they will be able to keep their status even when the new immigration system comes into effect. So if they have to apply for an extension, they can still do that under the skilled worker category and essentially combine the amount of time they've spent on the Tier 2 visa with the skilled worker visa to qualify for the 5-year period, which then allows them to get indefinite leave to remain. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of roles and sponsorship, what does this mean for the college in terms of roles that we can sponsor moving forward? The full list of jobs that will be eligible for sponsorship can be found on the Standard Occupational Codes list, which we currently work with as well. But moving forward, academic roles such as your readers, professors, senior lecturers will all still be eligible for sponsorship. So will your research positions such as postdoc researchers, research fellows. The thing to note here is that we do have to meet the minimum salary requirements. So if you appoint an academic at less than 1 FTE, if the minimum salary doesn't meet the requirements that are set by the government, then there will be a problem with sponsoring them at that level. With the salary and the qualification dropping, roles such as technicians, librarians, chefs, electricians are now also eligible for sponsorship. Some roles have not been added to the list and they won't be eligible for sponsorship just because of their salary and qualification level. And this includes your roles like receptionists and general admin assistants. Next slide, please. So a quick summary of the costs for the college with the new process coming into effect. For each migrant worker that the college employs for a non-PhD level role will have to incur the immigration skills charge, which I touched upon earlier. That is £1,000 per worker for the first 12 months and £500 for every 6-month period. And this is the duration of their employment with the college. The college will also have to pay the certificate of sponsorship fee, which is £195. And again, just to reiterate, this applies to all non-PhD level roles and will also be applicable to all EEA and Swiss nationals, which we didn't currently have to pay for at the moment. Next slide, please. So a quick summary of the cost that the employee will have to incur from the 1st of January. EEA nationals, including Swiss nationals, will have to pay the immigration health surcharge if they come to the UK for more than 6 months. And that is, as I said before, £624 per annum per household member. So it has increased slightly. They will also have to pay for their visa costs, which for a visa for up to 3 years is £610 if they apply from outside of the UK, and £704 if they apply to switch their visa within the UK. Dependents will also have to pay the same visa fees, and if they apply for a visa for more than 3 years, they will have to pay £1,220 outside of the UK and £1,408 if they apply to extend or switch within the UK. The college does, however, have an immigration loan scheme, which allows individuals to take up a loan for up to £10,000, which helps them with their cost of visa, and also it allows them to apply for indefinite leave to remain under this loan scheme as well. This loan, however, comes into effect once they have commenced their post with the college. Thank you. Next slide, please. Student workers. So what do these changes mean for our student workers? Student workers will still continue to be engaged in casual positions. However, that is only if they have their own student visa, which allows them to undertake such work. The student visa is now replacing the Tier 4 general visa. Students will still only be able to work for a maximum of 20 hours per week. And upon successful completion of their degree, this is what's changing. They can stay in the UK for a maximum of 2 years if they're a graduate. And if they're studying for a PhD, they can stay in the UK for 3 years to find work. UK students will no longer have to be added to the student worker spreadsheet, which may be great news for some of you. However, that does still mean that we have to make sure that we are monitoring their hours, checking their hours, and ensuring that they do not go beyond the 20 hours or otherwise stated on their biometric resident permit. So we do have to make sure that we do still monitor that. And if we find that they are going above their hours, appropriate action will have to be taken. Next slide, please. Okay, So frontier workers, this is probably a new terminology for some of you, or otherwise called cross-border workers. They're essentially EEA and Swiss nationals who remain resident outside of the UK, but they have an employment contract with the college. So they come and work in the UK. They have to be in the UK for less than 180 days in any 12-month period. There is a requirement for these individuals to return to their home country at least once in a 6-month period. What the government has done is on the 10th of December, they launched, or they will be launching, a frontier worker permit scheme. So anybody working for the college under this arrangement should be applying for this worker permit scheme. Frontier workers before the 31st of December this year will have to apply for the scheme by the 30th of June next year if they want to continue working for the college and in the UK under this arrangement. As it stands, the application is free and there's no time limit to apply. In line with the email that Helen, our director, has sent, if you have any employees working for you in such an arrangement, please do make us aware so we can, one, encourage them to apply, but also look at implications in terms of tax. So you can raise this to us and we can have a discussion with finance to see what further advice we need for these workers. Thank you. Next slide, please. Hourly paid staff. So what these changes mean for hourly paid staff. So your visiting lecturers, tutors, hourly paid teaching staff, under this new process, they won't be eligible for sponsorship because we won't be able to justify the salary levels. If, however, they have their own permission to work in the UK, or they have another substantive post with the college, which is less than 1 FTE, we can still engage them. The same applies for casual staff. We won't be able to sponsor them, but if, however, they have their own right to work or they have another post with the college which still allows them to undertake casual work, we can engage them. Next slide, please. Academic visitors. So academic visitors is essentially a subcategory of the standard visitor route that the government has. Academic visitors can come to the UK for a period of 12 months. There is an application process. They have to apply for a visa to do that. They are not able to extend their visa from within the UK. The academic visitor, if they are looking to come to the college or we wish to invite an academic visitor, they will need an invitation letter from the college. They will also need to demonstrate that they are highly skilled in their own field of expertise and they are working in the field at another academic or higher education institution elsewhere. In terms of stuff that they can do when they come to the college, they can carry out their own private research for their own purposes. If, for example, they're on sabbatical leave from their own institution, they can come to the college and share knowledge and expertise. If, for example, they're an eminent professor, they can also undertake research, teaching or clinical practice. But we do have to make sure that the engagement that we have with academic visitors, it does not amount to paid or unpaid work. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so right to work checks. With the new process coming into effect, there are also going to be some changes in terms of right to work checks. For existing EEA nationals, at the moment, we don't have to do, as I said earlier, any further checks on them, providing they were in the UK by the 31st of December. The college will ask a further question on the applicant tracking system, Stonefish, that we use. We will ask applicants what right to work status they have in the UK, and should they tell us that they do have settled status, we won't ask for evidence and we'll continue to accept their ID card and passport on that basis. For new employees the college intends to sponsor, we will obviously carry out the right to work checks as we do now, so that's their passport or their ID card or any other visa that they have. For new starters that confirm that they have their own permission to work in the UK, for example, they have indefinite leave to remain, or they're working as a dependent, or they have some other sort of permission, again, we will accept their ID documents in the form of a passport, visa, or a student card if applicable. Next slide, please. So for those that the college sponsors, in line with how we sponsor them at the moment, we will do the same. We will issue them with a certificate of sponsorship. Once they have their visa, we'll be required to check their biometric residence permit. From the 1st of July, however, next year, we will be checking whether EEA and Swiss nationals have settled or pre-settled status. At the time of making an application, these individuals get something called a share code. We will obtain that share code and check that on a government website which will tell us that they have right to work in the UK, what status they have, but it will just confirm whether they do have right to work in the UK or not. The Moodle course that we have will be updated in terms of what further right to work checks managers or accountable officers should be doing. But I do also just want to add there that with COVID at the moment, we are doing virtual checks. We've been checking right to work documents over video call. These checks will continue until the government announces that we should be doing retrospective checks for these individuals physically now. And when the government does make that announcement, we will have 8 weeks to do these right to work checks. But as it stands, that announcement hasn't been made, and we will continue to do these checks online, over video call even. Thank you. Next slide, please. So in terms of useful links, you can find further information on these changes that are coming into effect on the college's EU Hub page. There is also a section for frequently asked questions, which we are continually monitoring and updating. The immigration loan scheme, which the individuals can make use of, can be found. The information on the scheme can be found under the pay and benefits section. The government website does also have information around what the new changes are. It's quite a lengthy document, but there are summaries that you can find as well. And if you do have further information around what this means for your staff, further recruitment, what it means, you can directly get in touch with myself or Rachel on these email addresses provided. Next slide, please. So a quick summary in terms of what we have to do moving forward. As a college, we've got to make sure that we are considering all candidates equally, regardless of their immigration status. So we shouldn't be giving preference to candidates who already have right to work in the UK, because by doing that, we are essentially discriminating, and we should not be doing that. Where you can, please do encourage your existing EEA and Swiss nationals to apply for the settlement scheme. By doing that, it will mean they will still be subject to the rules that are still in effect. And do also look at the information which is available on the college's EU Hub pages. And as before, if you do have any further information that you require, do get in touch with myself or any other member of the Human Resources Department team. Thank you, and I'm now open to questions.
I don't think we've got any questions in the chat. I mean, if anyone does have anything that they'd like to ask, Rudiger, have you got a question?
Yes, this is why I raised my hand. I've got two questions. One is I have in my department a lecturer who lives in Belgium. He has settled status. So I just want to know if he has to apply for. I can't remember what the term was that he used.
Frontier worker.
Yes, exactly. I mean, can you be a frontier worker and have settled status? How does this interact?
I would say if he's got settled status, he doesn't need to apply for it because he's already got permission. But it might be worth us just because, to be honest, that's the first one on us. So actually details, and we can just have a look into that. But I would say if he's got settled status, he wouldn't need to apply for the frontier worker. But we will look into that. If you can send over the details, we'll just double check it. Okay,
thanks. The other question was the charges, the various charges that the college has to pay when employing a migrant, as they are called now. Who pays it?
It comes out of department's budgets.
And the department operational budget?
The short answer to your question is this has been picked. We've raised this at the moment. There was talk that there might be a central budget, but I don't think that has been agreed. So at the moment, yeah, they would come out of normal recruitment costs, which would come out of school budgets and departmental budgets.
Okay, thank you.
But those costs are being monitored because we do need to monitor them, because obviously we need to know how much those costs are going to be, because it is a significant additional cost for the college. And actually, just as for information, it's been something that has actually been picked up by other universities and by UCEA with the government, because the additional cost for universities is significant. And so that is being picked up with the government. So hopefully it is possible that something may change in the future, but at the moment that is the position.
Okay, thank you.
So we have actually got quite a few questions in the chat. Let's just go back to the top. Peter, you've I think we've answered your question about who pays the costs. We just answered that one, but I think you had another question, didn't you? No.
Yes,
Peter?
I do have a. Hi, I have another question, which is about having competitive salaries with the EU academics. We've had difficulties over the years, the last few years, getting EU people into the UK because of the extra cost. Now we have an extra cost. What's the policy here in terms of things like market supplements to try and cover the extra costs that are being imposed by the government?
Well, I mean, obviously we wouldn't be proposing that market supplements would be used routinely. Clearly, we do have a market supplement policy, so if and when if there were individual circumstances, that could be considered, but it wouldn't be something that would be considered as a rule. Actually, Anand, were you going to say something?
Yes, I was going to say, with the new rules that are coming into play, allowances won't be considered as part of the salary. So the salary threshold that we have to meet, any allowances on that are not considered.
But I think the point that you were making, Peter, was more around attracting the people into the UK, wasn't it?
Oh, indeed. I mean, they're going to be lecturers at 40,000 plus. So hopefully that's reasonably attractive. But we've found that in many countries they get much more than that as a basic lecturer salary. So we have to think about the market supplements to attract good talent from the EU now, even more so than before. The other aspect I wanted to ask about was these frontier workers. Two of my colleagues have gone back to their home countries and are lecturing remotely, etc. I think they've both got settled status in the UK. Do they now count as frontier workers because they're mostly working from their home countries?
But the intention would be that they would be coming back, wouldn't it? Because the intention would be the college expects that its staff would be working from campus and would be based in the UK. Well, would be based in the UK. We do expect that our staff are resident in this country. So therefore, they would not be frontier workers because they wouldn't in normal instances be out of the UK. They would be here. And the frontier workers is for people who the intention would be that they would continue to have that arrangement. And the college actually does expect that its staff would be resident.
Okay, so I'll tell them that they should be resident and they should aim to come back to the UK as soon as possible.
I mean, I think obviously Anna made reference to the email that Helen had sent out about global mobility. So if you could include their details, and obviously we are just going through and checking all of these because COVID has obviously not helped with people going home because of COVID as well. And then there are some sort of long-term arrangements. So it would be good if you could include them and then we could just make sure. But yes, the intention is that the college's view is that everyone should be resident here in the UK, and therefore we wouldn't expect that we shouldn't really have many frontier workers. It was just, I think we're aware that there may be a couple, but I don't think these people would fall into that category because the intention is not that they're going to continue to work overseas, is my understanding from what you're saying.
Well, I hope they come back, but of course, who knows what they intend to do now.
Yeah, I think the college's position would be they would need to come back. So, yeah,
okay.
But yeah. Okay, so sorry, just going back. Michelle, did you have a question? We're not contacting them directly, no, because actually the decision was made that actually managers should contact through Cascade the information, and obviously the information is available on the web pages for them to have a look. So we have got links on there.
So is there a report that the managers? I know who my team, who is UK and non-UK based, but is there a report or any information that HR can supply to managers to say that these are EAA workers, and you might advise contacting them for applying for settled or pre-settled status.
We have already done that for some areas, to be honest. Yeah, absolutely. We could do that. We could send around a list to every department, just making them aware of who they've got. So yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. And then my other question is about the visiting lecturers markers. Just if I understood it correctly, are we not allowed to hire anybody from outside the UK now from the 1st of January in this post?
Unless they've got their own permission to work in the UK, which some of them will, because some of them may be working at another university and it might be supplementary employment.
Right, okay.
And so it will depend on their individual circumstances. So the answer is we can't sponsor anyone. So anyone who doesn't have another job in the UK or doesn't have permission to work in the UK, no, we can't. But some people may have that permission, so it will be on an individual basis.
Again, is there any way that we can support to? Because I know in my school, for example, we support hiring people in these posts, but I wouldn't know if they've got permission to work in the UK necessarily. If they've got another post in the UK, is there anything we can do to help with that? Because if this comes into effect 1st of January, we've got to do those checks now.
But you mean for new starters, don't you?
New starters, but also people that we've maybe extended a contract that they started working this term, they'll continue next.
Hey, because as long as people are already here in the UK by the 31st of December, they're okay. So those people you've already got here and you've already used will be fine.
Okay, and it's just anyone who's new starting from next term, from January, we just need to check that they've got permission to work in the UK.
Yes. And if you need support with checking that, yes, absolutely, contact us.
Thank you. Because that would be, I think, the bit that would be beneficial. Thank you.
Okay, so Jude, did you have a question? Jude Middleton?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, we sometimes put on lecture series, and because of COVID, everything's been happening remotely. So if somebody is outside of the country and we get them to do a Zoom lecture, is this at all affected by these regulations, or can we just hire them and pay them and have them not even come into the country?
Anam, do you want to say anything on that?
See, the right to work check is applicable for the individual when they are working physically in the UK. I mean, I don't know whether we should have lectures just giving Zoom or webinar or lectures over Skype like that. But in terms of the process, it is if they are physically based in the UK.
I mean, it's not, but it's not for students so much as I work in. We don't actually run any student courses in our department, in our little section, Story Futures. We're more about working with businesses and research and development for businesses. So we sometimes put on lecture series that we want external people to attend just to increase our engagement. So there wouldn't necessarily be students. And quite often webinars, which is, you know, for information to increase engagement, things like that. So for those purposes, sorry, yeah, I wanted to know if we get somebody, because we're at the moment, we've got a joint initiative with Canada. So if we get a Canadian person to give a webinar, how is that affected by all of these things? Is it affected at all?
I was going to say, I think there are other issues here in relation to finance and in relation to how these are paid. And I noticed actually, Mary White, you have your hand up, so I didn't know if you wanted to say something on that.
Hi, Rachel. Yes, I just wanted to highlight that we are still the employer if we're employing these people. And so there are certain obligations as an employer that we need to do. We need to deduct the correct level of tax, social security, and we need to ensure things like pension and insurance is in place. And if staff work overseas, so if we're employing someone to work in Canada for us, then we need to comply with the Canadian legislation, so we would need to take advice as to whether we would need to register those people and deduct Canadian taxes in that country. So there are other things. It's not immigration as such, so it's not really relevant to this webinar.
Sorry.
There are other things that we need to take into consideration.
Canada was probably a bad example. What I mean is, previously, if somebody was delivering that from France, you know, it wouldn't be such an issue. If they, is that now the case that oh no,
yeah, so the tax treaty, that the kind of right to work check that EU nationals wouldn't have had to have done because they were EU nationals in a country. So that has now changed. That legislation, this webinar is appropriate for that. So we would still be employing those people. We would still be the employer. But the tax, social security, pension, insurance issues are even more relevant now than they would previously have been. So there are other issues as well to consider when we're employing staff outside the UK.
Okay.
So just to highlight that a letter has gone, an email has gone round from Helen, head of HR, asking for so that we can have a kind of list of these people so that we can start looking into them. Each individual person probably is going to be in very different circumstances. So I encourage you to reply to that email via your head of school so that we can start looking into these cases.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think there have been a couple of other queries about people who are outside of the UK as well. So actually, again, just echoing Mary's point, can you just make sure you do include those in that list to Helen, because then we can look into all of them and look at all the details around that. Katrina, I think you had a question about, will student workers require a visa from the 1st of the 1st, 21?
Yeah, it's probably a silly question, so I maybe missed it on the bottom of the slide. I know that, you know, for their tuition fees and everything, there's no change for this academic year. But if we want to, you know, employ somebody to do some demonstrating, for example, in a lab, will they need to have the correct visa from the 1st of January?
But they can still work on their Tier 4.
But at the moment, if they're EU, they won't have a... do they automatically get a Tier 4 visa then?
No,
sorry.
Well, I think they can do. Anam, can you? Obviously, we're not experts on the student side, but in terms, my understanding is they carry on as they are. Nothing is really changing for the ones who are already here.
Yeah.
Then it continues as it is in the same principle as for staff. Anam, can you just confirm?
Yeah, but any students, any EEA students as well from the 1st of January now, if they intend to come to study for more than 6 months, they will need a student visa.
Okay, but if they were already here, so if they started their academic year in September, are they okay for this academic year?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that will be fine.
Thank you.
Peter, I noticed you've got some comments about people being part-time EU residents. Would you be able to just feed that information into Helen, and then we can pick those up as part of looking at all of those people who fall into that category?
Yes, of course.
Okay, that's fine. Michael, I noticed you've said about webinar being not a service. I think we'll pick that up as part of the work we're doing anyway, but thank you for that. Jen, I notice you've got your hand up. Sorry if I hope I haven't nipped in front of anyone else. Let's just, Jen, you have got your hand up though.
Oh yeah, no, I just was wanting to clarify that I think there's a lot of confusion around the one-off payment, and that's what I think people are talking about. So we do a lot in both Story Futures, but in all academic departments, of research talks where we bring in an academic from another country to do a talk. It's, you know, through a research seminar, or this is what Peter's saying about an honorarium to give a speech. So those are not people who we would be sending through, because those are not people who are regular employees. They're people who we pay. That's why this is an honorarium or a kind of one-off fee. And so I think that's what is being discussed here. So I think that's the question, is how will those people be affected?
Mary, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so anything that you pay in lieu of pay, like an honorarium, is affected by this. So it would be considered pay. So you would have to, you're effectively employing those people and paying them to do that, but bringing them in for travel and paying their expense, bringing them over here to give a lecture where you're not paying them, you're paying their expenses, that's fine.
Okay, but so I think like the question Jude had is that right now we can't really bring them over, so we may be paying them, but they're doing it on Zoom or something, or on Teams. And so it's the same
difference
principle.
is paying them. So paying them is paying them for their time and creates a kind of work. It's considered then that we are actually employing those people, whereas paying expenses for those people is not considered. They're not considered as our employment. So I would recommend not offering honorariums to visiting people in future, and just offering to pay expenses.
Because that's a big cultural shift for a lot of academic departments, I think, and in a way, I think it's really unfortunate if we can't get around that, Thank you.
Okay, I think actually we've answered all the questions we've got at the moment, unless anyone had anything else they think we've missed, or there's anything else that people wanted to pick up. No? Okay, well, thank you very much for all attending. I hope you did find that helpful. As I say, there is going to be further information on the EU Hub, so do please have a look there. And if you have any particular questions, then please come back to us, and please do provide the information to Helen, because obviously that will allow us to look at the complete picture. Very much. It was much appreciated, and yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.